Welcome to session number 2. My name is Jennifer Rao and I'm part of Sociocracy for All. I want to start this meeting with an opening round, so please, facilitator, start an opening round where people can share how they're coming into this meeting. Okay, the next piece is administration. Do you know when your next meeting is? Does anybody have any announcements? Let's do a round on that now to make sure we're on the same page. The next step is to consent to the agenda. I'm going to let you know what my proposal is for the agenda, and you will have to either consent to it or find a way to tweak it. First step is, I would like to talk about the big picture. What is sociocracy really about? What is the point about sociocracy? And then, following from that, I will give you an outline of what the study group is going to cover. Then we're going to talk about meeting format. What does a typical sociocratic meeting look like? And we're going to talk about policy and operations. The last piece will be for you to start making a proposal, and I will walk you through that. So let's do a round, see if you consent to this agenda. What is sociocracy really about? And I want to step back and think with you about what are organizations really about? Why do we form organizations? And for me, there are 3 answers to that. One is, there are things that we can't do by ourselves because we need more minds, more hands, more resources in general to do something. The second one is, for me, all of those point to what we would want from a governance system. How can we support what we want from an organization in our governance method? The first piece is, well, if we want to join forces because the thing that we want to do is bigger than what one individual can do, then that means we have to plug the pieces together in a way that it is effective. The second one is that we enjoy working together. We're social beings. We want to be working alongside with others. And the last one is that we want to contribute to something that is bigger than we are. And the third one is we have an organization where we have many people with different perspectives. How can we harvest that in the best way? Because if only I decide and only my opinion is going to be heard, then we're going to miss out so many perspectives that we have. And that is the strength of the organization, that we have so many people who know different things. So we need a governance method that actually gives us access to all that information, where that doesn't get lost along the way. The reality is that typically governance methods don't give us that. And let's look at just decision-making. Look at the 3 most used decision-making methods that we all have some experience with. The first one is autocratic decision-making. Somebody just makes the decision and expects you to do it. The typical behavior, and I know that about me, is to go into rebellion. If somebody tells me to do something, my first instinct is, no, I want to have a say in what I do. Everybody wants power in their world. So we have to work with people. Many of us grew up being told that when we vote, that's fair. Then we do what the majority wants to do. But how's that fair if we can ignore up to half of the people who have been voting? If slightly less than half of the people disagree, we're still all going to do it? If you look at it that way, it's actually surprising that we even got used to majority vote. One big problem about majority vote is also that we lose information. So the people who said no, why did they say no? Especially in secret ballot, we will never hear who said no and why. Besides the fact that it's tyranny of the majority, we're also losing so much information and data. Consensus. Let's go with the simplistic definition of consensus. We only do something if everybody agrees. What happens here is that one person that disagrees can have a lot of power over the group, because the whole group can move as long as there are a few people who object. That makes it very slow and very frustrating. So although we want to live in a world where we all agree, we don't seem to be able to work together that way. The idea sounds good, but in reality it doesn't work that way. Working together can be frustrating, it can be slow, can get annoyed. We don't seem to be getting what we want. And there are some other pieces too that sociocracy has a wonderful way of dealing with. For instance, we might have policies, but they're not even current. So we start not caring what it says in the policy because it's not up to date anyway. And we have no system in place to keep up with it. And meetings seem to take forever and still not go anywhere. And half of the things that we talk about in meetings are irrelevant to what I actually do. Nobody wants to work like that. So what is sociocracy about? Sociocracy, for me, is culture change. I know that's a big vision, but for us there's no other way because we don't have the resources to waste so much time and energy in meetings and in ways of doing things that people are not really engaged in. So what can we do? Sociocracy is a toolkit that has 3 big sectors, and the tools in the toolkit all match and work together. That means they even reinforce each other, and I will explain you what I mean by that. One big area is organizational structure. How do we build an organization so that we can be effective, transparent, and not ignore anybody, have equivalence of voices? The second one is how can we make decisions so that it is effective and transparent and we don't ignore anybody? And the third one is how can we give feedback so that we are transparent and we talk with each other, to each other with respect, and so that we know more effectively what the reality is for other people and what the data is that we need to take into consideration. So transparency and effectiveness and equivalence are not some random values. It is actually the core of what makes an organization work for human beings. So let us look at the outline for this class. First, we did election process. I wanted to make sure that you as a circle have an infrastructure so you can actually do things. So first, strengthen the circle. Today we're going to talk about meetings. So you as a circle want to be able to run meetings, and I'm going to teach you how. And you also want to work towards decisions. So that's why we're generating proposals today. In the next meeting, we're going to look at consent and how do we deal with objections, because that is a huge area of sociocracy where we can learn a lot. The next piece is going to be the organizational structure. So going from one circle to decision-making, actually doing things, we now scale it up to a big organization. The 5th session is going to be about feedback. How can we set up an organization so that over time we can adapt and evolve and get better at what we're doing and how we communicate with each other? The last session is going to have some fun pieces, some interesting pieces, some revision, and we'll also give you some time to explore something of your own choice. So now that you know what all this is about, I want you to do a reaction round. How did this land on you? What are the questions that you have? Do a reaction round now. I promised to show you how to run a sociocratic meeting, and I prepared the decision-making sheet for you that is in your handout. On the decision-making sheet, you have different sections, and it's everything that you need to run a sociocratic meeting on one page. So I'm aware that it can be a little overwhelming, but I'm going to point out to you what the pieces are. The top left corner is everything that you need for the normal outline of a policy meeting. We're starting with an opening round, then we do administration, content, closing round. You've done that before, you're in the middle of such a thing. The content is some subset of the steps in the middle on the top of this decision-making sheet. We can generate proposals or we can make decisions about proposals. That's what we do in a policy meeting. On the right, you can see your options for if there are objections. We will talk about that a lot in the third session, so I'm not even going to talk about it now. I want you to focus very quickly on the bottom left part of the sheet. That's the format for operational meetings. There's no rocket science in that. This is just a meeting for if you just have to figure out who does what and who needs which machine when and who's going to work where when. That kind of meeting, operational meetings, have a very simple format, and I'm not even going to talk about that here. I want to focus on policy meetings. In the middle is the outline for an election. You did elections last time. What was on your handout? This is exactly the same. On the right, on the bottom, there are some facilitation tips that I'm not going to go into now, since this is not a class focused on facilitation. One quick comment about policy and operations. People sometimes have a hard time telling those two apart. So here's what I have to say about it. Operations is everything that we do in our circles. We come together because we work together. That's what sociocracy is about. It's those who associate together, so those who work together, decide together. So assuming that a real circle would meet so that you can govern your work that you're doing together, then operations is the work that you are actually doing. Policy is decisions that you make about how you do your work. Let's use an example. The first example is, let's say you are a baking circle and you have as your operations baking bread. What are the steps involved? Well, it's ordering supplies, it is starting the dough, it's supervising the dough, whatever you might be doing with it, shaping it, baking it. What would be policy decision here? Well, policy decision could be, what kind of flour do we use? If you're in a group of many bakers, you as a group, as the baking circle, decide what kind of flour you use. There can be big decisions in there. For instance, do you use organic or conventional flour? What's the amount of salt that you use? Do you need a new machine? How often do you buy a new machine? And so on. Let's look at a totally different example. If you're a membership circle managing the membership of an organization, what would be operations? Well, operations are sending an email to a prospective member, printing membership cards, tracking which of the members have already paid their membership fee. What are policy decisions in a membership circle? Well, policy decisions would be setting different levels of memberships. Maybe you have different kinds of members. What are their fees? Do they pay different fees? Or you could also make decisions about if somebody expresses interest in joining your organization, so as a prospective member, what kind of materials does that person get sent? Maybe you want to standardize the process. In that case, you make policy. And I like what somebody said to me recently. So really in sociocracy, everything is allowed until it's not. So you as a group, as a circle, do your work. And if there's an issue, you make policy so that you can learn together from it and do things differently. If this didn't work, well, let's see what would work and play with that. That's what policy is about. And I want to point out to you that policy is not something that comes from the outside. It's something that the people who actually do the work make for themselves. So policy is not something that includes power over. It is guidelines that you come up with for yourself to make your operations better, more effective, more transparent, or just run more smoothly. Let's do a reaction round on this. Let's keep it brief, but do a reaction round of a few minutes and write down your questions, please. Do that now. Now that you know what policy is, how do we make policy? And sociocracy offers a process for that I really like. However, it's a process that is different from what we are used to, and I will explain to you why. So that's why we are going to work with an example that I have. I have some footage for you from a real circle that made policy together. The first step in making policy is to come up with a proposal, and that is sometimes hard for groups because we don't know how to make policy. We feel like you have to be a lawyer in order to do that, but that's not true. The process that is called picture forming and proposal shaping is a process that breaks it all into doable chunks that you can do together. And the good thing about it is that it's very collaborative and still saves you time. So the first thing that you do is picture forming, and you're not going to jump into opinions first, but instead you first set the stage. So what's the issue? Why is this coming to us? What are we trying to achieve here? What are we trying to fix? The next step will be to gather all the dimensions. What do we have to consider so we can even make any decisions here? What are the considerations that we would have to make so we can make a good policy decision? And the group that I brought you some footage from was trying to make a decision on presenting their own work to a larger organization. So they are trying to decide how they're going to do that. That is a policy decision. And here you can see the dimensions that they came up with.
Are we going to talk about the process that we went through or how things went for us, or is it just a time to share our product?
So what do we want people to know about the case studies? Should we have an interactive component? Who of us should present?
It helps if the facilitator or somebody else supports people in finding the right words for what they're trying to say, for what the dimension is.
So you would say content, visuals, and who to put it together?
You will be able to use this list later in the process, and also it's something that unites the group early in the process before you go into different opinions. You will notice when you're coming to an end for this process when people start passing.
I don't have any dimensions to add, I guess.
For me, I'd say everyone pretty much covered anything that I thought of in terms of elements.
The facilitator is checking in whether everything is written down by the secretary.
Perfect. Damien, did you get all that?
I did, but it was difficult, but I guess I have it.
Are we ready to move to the next step? We only want to make that transition when everybody is on the same page, so we're making that decision together, and it's a consent decision.
Okay, so thumbs up, moving forward. Not yet. Okay, thumbs up. All right.
We're now doing a round where everybody says, this is what I think we should do. And we're trying to break it up into little pieces so that not the first person in the round is going to solve everything. We want it to be a collaborative process. Those pieces don't necessarily have to fit together yet. They can even contradict each other. That's fine. Just write them down.
Maybe share all the information, but just the highlights. And we, how it went overall for our whole group, how our group learned and progressed.
Okay, so I want people to walk away with an understanding of sort of the feeling of
They're
our
getting
group.
more and more into detail
Also
as
with
they
2 to
circle
3
around in the
interesting
group,
things that we learned
gathering
from
more
the
and more
case
ideas of
studies.
what people are thinking.
Except for the how many people present, I think it's easier if it's only one person.
And then also wanting to add visualizations, and one being geography-wise so that people can see where in the world, and then just having pictures of the experience and perhaps even their like.
Could do a screen share with some pictures too, with those highlights of each case.
When you run out of ideas, you can look at your list of dimensions, see whether you've covered everything, and maybe address one of those dimensions there.
That answers who would present. I believe it would be the people who did their case
A good
studies.
facilitator will check back and see whether what people have said is captured in a way that represents what they've been saying.
Your addition is 1 person versus 3 people. Sounds like you like Katie's proposal and you're just adding the component of the people presenting.
We want this to be a collaborative process. And also it takes away the intimidating part of making a proposal. You can do it as a group. You can each contribute a little bit, and together you can form a proposal. Now we have to organize those ideas, and that is typically a one-person job. In this training, they actually took a 1-minute break so one person would have time to write it all down.
So I will take a minute to give a proposal.
The author who's writing up the proposal will notice which pieces of the proposal are controversial and which are not.
It sounds like the only thing that was different among all of us was 3 people versus 1 person.
It is important to make a proposal and not tiptoe around the controversial issues. Just put something into the proposal and people will be able to consent or object. The person who writes up the proposal will also check with a list of dimensions and see whether everything was covered. The last thing you will do after you have your proposal is you will go into the consent process, so you will have clarifying questions, quick reactions, and then consent or dealing with objections. So now that you've seen that, let's assume that you wanted to make policy. You could be making policy very similar to the group that you just saw. For instance, you might be inspired by what you've been learning, and you might want to show other groups or other people in your organization what this whole thing is about. And since you're already experts on rounds because you've done so many, I'm proposing that you come up with a proposal on how to present rounds. What would be the dimensions for that? And this is hard for groups often because it's so easy to go into opinions. So I'm going to tell you what the dimensions are that I see, and then you can add yours. So if we think about you presenting rounds to an outside group or to people outside of your group, what are elements that we would have to consider? Well, one of them is pretty obvious to me, and that is, who's our audience? Who are we presenting to? The other one is, who from this group is going to present? Everyone individually? Everyone in one group? Or do we work in pairs? How do we do that? Another element would be, what's the content? Do we want to give some general overview of a round, or do we want to talk about our own experiences? How long is our presentation going to be? So you can see that the dimensions that I named were all questions or phrases. I want you to add some, and I want you to hold back on opinions. We're only setting the stage right now. So what comes up for you? Let's do a round, and if you don't have anything to add, that's totally fine, then just pass. And if you have anything, then write it on your list. So do that now. Okay, so now what I want you to do is similar to what the group did. Consent to the completeness of your list. And it will probably not be perfect. This is just about making sure that we're not cutting off anybody who still had something to say. So instead, what I want you to do is decide together as a group that you're ready to move on. So now do a quick consent round. Okay, now what are proposal ideas that you have? Depending on your organization or your background of your group, you could be presenting to the rest of the organization. So now let's do a round, and each of you adds 1 or 2 proposal pieces to this list, and you just keep going around until everybody passes because they don't have anything more to say. Okay, do that now. All right, now you have a list of proposal pieces for your own proposal, and I hope you got a little excited about actually doing something like that. If you don't, this is a good exercise anyway. I don't want you to actually turn this into a proposal right now. I would like you to do that with a coach. If you don't have a coach, somehow you will have to figure that out. Next time, you will need a proposal that covers all the dimensions that you've gathered in your group. And we're done for today. Now it's only a meeting evaluation. I want the facilitator to call around on meeting evaluation, and I will see you next time.